Welcome to Legal Studies, and today we're going to be learning about the role of the judge, jury, parties, and legal practitioners in a civil trial. So where are we in the study design? Well, so far in this area of study, we've been thinking about all the steps that lead up to a trial. We've been thinking about the journey from start to finish, and we started off by looking at some of the factors you consider before you sue someone, such as how much it's going to cost. We looked at some of the alternatives you might have. Instead of suing someone, maybe you'd go to VCAT or CAV. Then we looked at, well, if you've decided to sue someone, what sort of steps do you have to take first? What are the civil pre-trial procedures? Now, here we are, we're in the court, we're at our civil trial, and we're looking at what do the different people do? Who's involved and what do they do? The judge, the jury, the parties, and the legal practitioners. And today, we're just going to look at the first two, the judge and the jury. So, starting with the judge, their main role is to act as an impartial and independent adjudicator in the civil trial. And as part of that, they've got a number of other responsibilities. First of all, they'll manage the running of the trial. So they have a number of what's called case management powers, which let them manage the trial in a way to try and make sure things are finished efficiently and as quickly as possible. So they could give you directions, for example, to limit the number of witnesses you're allowed to call, or limit the number of documents you provide as evidence, or require you to attend mediation to try and solve it before going to court. All of these things they can order you to do to try and make the case resolve quickly and efficiently. They also make decisions on the admissibility of evidence. They might decide you're not allowed to ask that question or use that document in court because it's not relevant or because it might be too prejudicial or for a number of reasons. So they can decide which evidence is and isn't allowed to be heard. They can give directions to the jury. They might explain to the jury what a particular piece of law means, for example, or how to apply the law. If the jury isn't there in a civil trial, juries are optional in a civil trial. So if there isn't one, the judge also has the role of determining liability. So do they accept the case or not? Who wins the case? And they'll make a decision about the remedy. Should you get money? Should you get an injunction? How much money should you get? That sort of thing. That's the judge's role if there's no jury. And finally, they'll make a decision on legal costs. So typically, if you win your case, the other side is usually ordered to pay most of the costs of your legal fees and things like that. And that's one of the judge's roles, to decide how much of the legal costs the losing party should have to pay. Some strengths and weaknesses of the judge's role. Well, because they're an impartial third party, they are upholding the role of fairness in our legal system. They make sure that the rules of evidence and procedure are applied sort of even-handedly to both sides, making sure that there's no bias or disadvantage there. They instruct the jury to focus on only the relevant facts of the case. So again, trying to make sure that the jury is acting in a way that is fair. On the other hand, because judges are often the most experienced professionals in the room, but they're required to act in an unbiased way, often that experience can go to waste, because people who might need extra help, such as an unrepresented person, the judge can't actually step in and help them too much for fear of appearing to be too biased. And then further to that, in a civil trial, because juries often aren't used in a civil trial because they're optional, we can end up with a judge-alone trial. And then you've got the potential that one judge just by themselves, there is the potential that that person is biased in some way, and that can have an impact on the case. And it also reduces the amount of community input in civil trials because, again, you don't have a jury, you've just got the single judge. Now let's have a look at what the jury does in a civil case. It's pretty similar to a criminal case. They have to remain objective and unbiased. They have to listen to and remember the evidence. They have to listen to the judge about what the law is and how to apply it. And if there is a civil jury, they actually get a little bit more power than a criminal jury does. They decide not only on the outcome, so they decide on liability, which side wins, and they also, in most cases, will decide on damages, so how much money you should get, with the exception of defamation cases where they're not allowed to decide on damages. So The jury's got a bit of an expanded role in a civil trial. However, this is balanced by the fact that juries in a civil trial are optional. By default, you won't have a civil jury, and if you want one, you have to pay for it. And the cost for a jury in a civil case are roughly $600 per day for the first week or so, and then after that, the costs rise to roughly $1,000 per day after a week. So it can be pretty expensive. So some strengths and weaknesses of this, well, just like a criminal trial, juries are selected randomly, and so hopefully therefore have no bias against either of the parties involved. Because juries in a civil case are a bit different and they actually get to decide on damages, unlike a criminal case where the judge gets to decide the outcome, the sentence. A civil case, the jury gets to decide that, which means there's a bit more community input into all aspects of the case. But that's sort of balanced by the fact that the juries are optional. So you often won't have a jury in a civil case. And when you do have a jury, it has to be paid for by the parties. And so some parties are not going to be able to afford that. Civil juries are also smaller, which means that if there is a jury member that happens to have a bias coming into it, and that there's less other jury members there to potentially balance out that bias. So there's more potential for bias to impact their decisions. And that's it for our judge and our jury. In our next video, we'll have a look at the role of the parties and the legal practitioners.